Hey there, Internet. This is Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters, here with another live stream, live podcast. This is episode number 48. And let me get my webcam turned on here. And let's see. There we are. Okay. Hey, how you guys doing? Anyway, thanks for coming by and checking out the stream. If you're around, feel free to ask questions as always. We're going to be talking about, let me get my angle a little bit better there. We're going to be talking about today, well, and many things, but the main topic I wanted to focus on was Linux versus Windows. And I know this is one thing that comes up quite a bit, and I realized that I never really did a video on this. So I was thinking about this actually when I was laying in bed this morning, right when I first woke up. I was like, this might be a cool topic to do a video on. And then I thought, well, I might as well just do a podcast on it and do a live stream. So, because I know a lot of people have opinions on this, and be a good thing to talk about. So anyway, first off, what you just heard was a song called Cloud Driver by me, Demonic Sweaters. And that is on my new album called In Depth, which you can get at anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com. And I'll post a link in the chat here. And you can also stream that here pretty soon, probably in the next few days, like week or so, on all the streaming services, Apple Music, Spotify, and all of that. So yeah, that was Cloud Driver off my new album, In Depth. So check it out if you haven't already. And so let's go ahead and get to it. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up, I know a lot of Linux users out there. Well, I mean, it's not just Linux users, it's computer users in general. You know, people that prefer one system over another get really, really emotional about this kind of thing. They're like, Windows sucks, Linux is amazing, and you're an idiot if you think Windows is good for anything at all. And the same thing happens with Mac users. They'll talk about how Mac is the greatest thing in the world. And same happens with some Windows users. So they'll talk about how Windows is the greatest thing in the world. And I am of the opinion, I don't know, call me crazy, but I kind of like all of them. I use Linux, about, I want to say 75-80% of the time. But I also do use Windows, which I'm using right at this very moment, actually. I'm streaming off of Windows today. And other times I stream from Linux. But I also use Mac OS as well, occasionally. That one's probably in the much lesser of the three, just because I don't have a current Mac, really. All of my Macs are very old, and I'm still using, like, Tiger, or at one point I had Snow Leopard, and, pretty old Mac systems at this point. So yeah, I mean, but that's not to say that it's not great as well. I mean, Mac OS is actually, a very fine OS. And I don't know. So, but the thing is, I wanted to talk about, you have your ups and downs, your pluses and minuses, your benefits and your problems with all of these OSs. And, we can just start right now with Windows, since that's what I'm using. Windows has a lot of problems, as I'm sure many of you know. One of the main problems with Windows, in my opinion, is speed. Because, especially if you compare it to like a lighter weight Linux distribution, it is quite slow. Compared, right now I have Windows 10 on this system that I'm using, which is a Dell gaming laptop, and I've done many videos with this system and talked about it a lot. But if I compare the performance with Windows 10 compared to Ubuntu, or Lubuntu, however you want to say it, Lubuntu just blows it out of the water. I mean, it's no contest. It boots up faster. Hey, Ritual301, how you doing? It just runs way, way faster with Linux. With Ubuntu. I haven't tried many other distributions on this particular laptop. And that's another thing that I will say, though, is the standard edition of Ubuntu, at least when it still used Unity. Now, I stopped using the standard version a while ago, so I haven't really used the GNOME version of Ubuntu. So I can't say for its performance as far as that goes, but I will say that Unity was about equal to Windows 10. I think they're about the same speed. But if you're using something like right now, I have a Plasma Desktop on here, and it runs really fast. It runs quite a bit faster than Windows 10. So that is one major advantage. And here is Pugo saying, come here after 24 hours trying to install my audio interface driver on Windows. Oh, well, yeah, that's another thing we could talk about with Windows is drivers, which can be a huge pain in the butt, which I'm sure a lot of you know. What kind of driver you try to install, Pugo? Yeah, I had a problem with, well, of course I was trying to do something that, isn't really a common thing to do, which is get an original inbox to run on Windows 10, which you can do, by the way, if you use a particular commercial driver called Ploytech. It will make the inbox one work, but the Ploytech driver pretty much kills every other audio system on Windows. Like if you're using USB for all, that will no longer function correctly, I've realized. But I'm no longer using that inbox. In fact, I'm selling it. I have it listed on Reverb right now. So if you're interested in my original Inbox One, you can check it out there. It's got all the packaging and all that stuff on there. But yeah, well, what kind of driver was it, Pugo? A Lexicon Alpha audio interface. I've never actually worked with a Lexicon interface, so I'm not too sure about that. Maybe you could try, just uninstalling the driver, all that usual crap you have to do. Completely uninstall the driver, let Windows search for it, or download the official one from the website and reinstall it that way. Sometimes you just have to wrestle with it for a while to get it to work. That seems to be a pretty common problem. And let's see, Ritual 301 says, I love my Linux and could never see myself ever going back to Windows for personal use anyways. But for the most part, I'm pretty ambivalent to what people choose to use. Yeah, I mean, well, let me tell you one of the main reasons why I use Windows sometimes is for Ableton Live. That is probably 99% of the time that I boot into Windows is because I want to use Ableton Live. Now, I have heard, that people can get it to run okay within Wine, but I don't want running okay. I want it to run really, really good because I want super low latency and I want to be able to produce music. And quite honestly, nothing, in my opinion, is as powerful and as good as Ableton Live is for producing music. It's just that simple. I mean, I love Reaper, and Reaper is probably the best DAW that you can get for Linux right now. And if you're just tracking music, and recording just standard MIDI and, live tracks, Reaper is amazing. And I use it a lot. But again, like Ableton just does so much amazing stuff, and it is such a cool program to use. I really wish they would come out with a Linux native version. And I know a lot of people, as soon as I say that, they're going to say, have you tried, what's that one? There's the Ableton-like thing that does run on Linux. I can't remember the name of it. But there's another program, Bitwig. Everybody always asks me, and I have tried the demo, and the performance was pretty terrible, honestly, on Linux. It wasn't usable, in my opinion. And plus, it's very expensive. So that's why I have never really used Bitwig. And it seems like the GUI is way too bloated. Ableton is just very fast, and you can be creative in Ableton. It is great software. And plus, I have one of these dealies. This is the Eyelock, and I've had this thing for years. And I have some commercial plugins and synths and stuff that I've been using since 2009 or 2008, and they still work. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, I can use a lot of my stuff in, the latest version of Ableton. Well, I have Ableton 9. It's not the latest version. But I can use that still to this day, all my commercial programs, except for the Waves stuff. Waves, I hate that company. And I might as well go off on a rant on that, too. But, But most of the other stuff, it does still work really good. I have some synths that I really like. There's some of the what's the company? UV. Is that what they're called? Anyway, I have some commercial software that I just really like. I love open source stuff too, but there's some, the reason why some of this stuff costs money is because it's nice. There's some really good stuff. And Ableton Live, the light, or not the light version, but the intro version, which is what I have, is only like $150 or $50, depending on if you get a coupon or whatever. So before I went off on that tangent, that is the main reason why I like to use Windows, is mostly for Ableton. I also like, there's the Windows Photo app, and it's gotten pretty good. I like it. Also, you can run Kdenlive in Windows now, which of course you can run in Linux too. But you can do a lot of stuff in Windows. There's a lot of the best programs that were only in Linux are actually available for Windows now too, like Kdenlive and GIMP, and even Rose Garden you can get on Windows, but it's kind of weird. It doesn't work so great. But yeah, I don't know. What else do I boot into Windows for? There's a couple, there's a proprietary software for my Zoom PSO4 that only works in Windows. I've tried to do it in Wine. It doesn't work. Gaming, of course, Windows. Although now my Steam library, a lot of it does work in Linux now, so there's not a whole lot of reason to do that anymore just for gaming. And I'm not even like a big gamer anyways. I mostly just play visual novels. That's like pretty much my only type of game that I like. And I don't even play those that much. Every now and then I'll go on like a little bit of a spree. Is that a word? Of like playing these games, when I'm bored. But I usually have way too much stuff to do. So Pugo, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to tell you about that audio driver for the Lexicon. Have you tried it in Linux? Maybe you'll have better luck. And also, what version of Windows are you using? Let me see what Ritual 301 says. Definitely stuff out there that work better on other OSs. I guess that should be expected when you have money to throw at a project. Linux doesn't do too bad being for free. And yeah, I absolutely agree. And especially with Reaper now. I mean, even though Reaper's not free, but it's cheap. And in Reaper, you can get some really, really good results in Linux and very stable. Like, it runs really, really good. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it used to be, I used to like to do some video editing in Windows too with Vegas, which I still do occasionally, but Kdenlive has gotten so good that I rarely have to use Vegas, except for like a couple of weeks ago, there was an update to Kdenlive that was terrible. Like, it really, really wrecked my system on the Linux side. And I was crashing all the time and everything, but it updated again, and it seems like it's better now. But yeah, I don't know. That'll happen occasionally. I'm trying to think. There's got to be something else I like in Windows. Oh, well, the Windows 3D Paint program is really cool. I really like that. And that's about it, really. I mean, most of the other stuff I do in Linux. Now, when you're going to do like, commercial work for, like, say you're recording a band or you're doing a mastering project or something like that for money, which I do occasionally. And, even then I'm kind of like half and half between Windows and Linux. If I'm mastering, a lot of times I'll use Linux because there's some tools in there that I like a lot. But again, most of these tools do work on Windows too. You have Mixbus. I usually use, even though I've done a ton of videos about mastering in Audacity, that's not really how I do it. Well, I do a little bit. I do the final touches there in Audacity, but the main part of the mastering I always do in Mixbus, because Mixbus, I think, has some of the nicest compressors and limiters that I've ever used for software. And so I usually do the vast majority of the mastering there, and then I do my maximizing and loudness, peak limiting within Audacity. So I can either do that in Windows or in Linux, and it just sort of depends on what's being most stable for me at the time that I'm doing it. I just mastered the new Echoscape EP that is coming out very soon, which you should check out. And I should play a song off that. I don't think he'll get mad if I do. But Echoscape, if you're not familiar, is my friend Satoshi Inouye's project from Japan, from Tokyo, Japan. And I played drums with him. Well, I'm actually on 2 of the songs. He used to live here in New York City, and we recorded several songs together. And some of that's already out there. But now he's got a band put together in Japan, and they are releasing the new EP. It's about half the stuff with me on it and half the stuff with the current drummer. And I did the kind of assistant mixed and did some mastering on that. But that one, I think I did about half in Windows and half in Linux. So it just depends on what I'm doing and what I have going on and what's being the most stable. Like stability really can be an issue and really can be a reason to want to use something. Now, a lot of people that produce music, they like to just have one system, and that's all they do, and they don't like to mess around with all this stuff because they're not a big nerd like I am, and they don't like to constantly be tinkering with computers and stuff. But, that's cool, But I like tinkering, and I know a lot of you guys do too, and that's why you watch this channel, because we like to mess with this stuff. And there's something cool about exploring, software, and if you're using new stuff, sometimes you start to think outside of the box and do things a little bit differently that you wouldn't do if you're using the same thing over and over again. But okay, so we touched on Windows. Oh, well, we didn't really go into the flaws so much, and there's a lot more to talk about that there. One of the things on Windows 10 that I regret doing is signing up for the Insider build edition. And if you're not familiar, Insider build is like Windows 10's beta. So you could get new stuff, that isn't available to everybody just yet. Like for instance, I have the new Windows search bar down on my taskbar that's separated from Cortana. I have a separate Cortana now, which I never use ever. So, I mean, they should just remove Cortana in my opinion, but they won't. But, so anyway, this Insider build, this thing is incredibly unstable. And once you do it, there's basically no way to revert back. The only way to revert back is to, well, I've read conflicting information about this. You can uncheck it, but I've had it unchecked for months, and it just does not seem to make a difference. I still have the Insider build. And I've read some forum posts that say that you have to just reinstall Windows to get rid of it. And then I've read some other ones that say that eventually when your Windows version catches up to the Insider build that you have, if the actual Windows version catches up to that and then it updates, then it'll finally take you off that Insider build. So I'm hoping that will happen on mine so I don't have to reinstall it. Because, I just don't want to have to go through the hassle of reinstalling all my stuff and all my plugins and programs and all of that. Of course, I'm backed up, but it's still a pain to do all of that. So, yeah, so stability with Windows 10. Now, if I were using just the standard, the regular build of Windows 10, it could be way more stable. But my version is not that stable. I have a lot of graphics lockups. And I think it definitely has to do with the Insider build because I didn't have them before I signed up for that. So that is annoying. Hopefully that won't happen while I'm doing this stream and it locks up. And usually what will happen is I'll get a green screen and then the computer just shuts down and I have to turn it back on and start over. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But yeah, Windows stability, that you can get lockups, Chrome. Seems to crash a lot on Windows 10. Opening apps sometimes can be slow. You have the search bar can be slow. There's a lot of stability crap. You have the notifications thing that's super annoying on the lower right-hand corner. I try to mute those as much as possible. What else? You guys have any bad, negative things you want to say about Windows, you can put them in the chat and I can address them. But yeah, I mean, it has plenty of stuff to dislike. But it has plenty of stuff to like too. Like a lot of stuff works in Windows, and there's a ton of free software. There's a ton of free plugins, music producing tools. Like I know like there's Mac users that say, oh, producing music on Mac's the best, but it depends on how you look at it. Windows has there's like 8 bajillion VSTs for Windows. Like the amount of VSTs that are available for free for Windows absolutely crushes the amount that's available for Mac and Linux. Linux has a lot now. Mac doesn't have a lot of free, actually. They have some great stuff, but a lot of it's commercial. But there is some free stuff, but there's no contest as far as that goes with Windows. Like Windows just has, you can go on FreeVST, I think it's freevst.com or freevst.net, and KVR and sites like that. And you can find more plugins. I apologize for the siren. It wouldn't be one of my podcasts or one of my streams if there wasn't an ambulance or a police car or anything out there. It just happens. But there's no contest. There's so much available for Windows, and there's so much free software too. You have almost as much free software for Windows as there are for Linux. I mean, there's a ton. And then there's some stuff that's available for free on Windows that isn't available on Linux. Like there's one called Format Factory that I like a lot. That's like a audio and video converter. It tries to sneak some spyware, or not spyware, but adware onto your computer if you're not careful. You just have to watch the installer when you're installing it to make sure you have everything unchecked that you don't want to install. But stuff like that with Windows. If you're one of the people that's been using Windows forever, like me, like I've had like the first Windows I ever installed on my computer was Windows 95 back in the 90s, like the actual 90s. And even back then when you were installing stuff, programs, it's like an old trick. They would always be constantly trying to sneak install stuff. And so as long as like not to go to like really sketchy websites and then download a bunch of iffy material and install like toolbars and like all this like garbage that can really mess up Windows, it can be pretty good, for the most part. And there's a lot of free stuff out there, and you can be very productive in Windows if you know what you're doing. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, if you're like somebody's mom or somebody's uncle or something, like, or grandma, they have a lot of problems. From doing technical support jobs, I would log into people's computers where like this much of the top of the browser was toolbars. It was like Yahoo toolbar, when the Google toolbar used to exist, like all these different toolbars, and like you'd have like this much browser and like this much toolbars, like and like the thing would be like crawling along, just barely working, and it'd take like 20 minutes for the computer to start up because they'd have so much crap on there and ads and just like garbage. And like to these types of people, like people that aren't computer people, I always recommend to buy a Mac, because a Mac, when you turn on a Mac, it will just work, and it's not going to give you any of that crap. It just won't. And I know a lot of like, diehard Linux and Windows users will be like, oh, Macs suck, some of them. But, as far as a stable system and a user-friendly system, nothing really beats a Mac. I mean, it just doesn't. Everything, as long as you are okay with using everything Apple, which I'm not, but if you are, and most of the time, those types of people, like the people that end up with 8 billion toolbars on their browser, they don't know the difference anyways, so they'll just gladly use whatever's there and easiest. Which for a Mac, just they just do that, like they just make everything easy. And so it's, it's great for those types of people. So anytime I know somebody that's like a computer, like illiterate, and just wants a good computer to get some work done, I always recommend a Mac, because, even though they're more expensive, but, they're more expensive for a reason. They look good and they work, that's just it. So anyway, I got a couple more comments here. Paladini971 says, who uses Windows these days? Linux Mint 19.1 can run circles around Windows 10. And I talked about that in the beginning a little bit. But, I also talked about it. When this is done, you can go back and, if you want to, listen to what I said about that. But, I use both. And Ritual 301 says, "Yup, my parents have problems with tech. I don't think my mom has ever even used a PC, like ever. It's nuts. My pops ain't much better." Yeah. Yeah, my dad, it's weird. When I was younger, my dad seemed to be the techie guy. And now he's just not. I don't know. He just doesn't really mess with it anymore, so he just forgot a lot of stuff. But my mom isn't that bad. She's actually pretty good compared to other people in her age group. She's not like, writing C code or anything like that, but she can navigate around, and get things done pretty well on a computer. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So let's talk about now. I went through a lot of the negatives of Windows, but let me go ahead and I'm going to play another song, and then we'll come back and I'm going to talk about some of the negatives of Linux, because there are a lot. And I wanted to be realistic about this, because I'm not going to say, this just blows away everything, like, because it's not for everybody, and there's a reason why. Not everybody uses Linux. So we'll talk about that when we come back. So let me go ahead and play a song, and then we'll be right back. What am I going to play? Let me see if I can play something from Echoscape, because I was talking about. And do I have this in here? See, that's the problem with my Windows. I'll just search in Apple Music. My Windows setup, I don't have everything configured, because I'm not in here all the time. I don't have my music library really here. I mean, it's on the hard drive. I could get it, but I don't have it configured really. So I'm going to play something here by my pal Satoshi that I was talking about. This isn't off his new album, if the internet ever picks up here. Oh, come on. Maybe I'm not going to play that. It's got to be here. Oh, maybe he's not on. I'm looking at Apple Music right now, and I should touch on. Oh, here we go. Here he is. I should touch on that too. I did a couple videos recently on Apple Music, and some of you may wonder why I talk about Apple Music, but I could address that as well. Okay, so I'm going to play a song called "Half Moon" by my friend Satoshi and his project Echoscape, and I'm going to go ahead and play that right now. So here we go. Okay. So, yeah, that was Echoscape with the song Half Moon. And let me make sure I don't get another song playing here. And, okay, so details of that track. That was, okay, so my friend Satoshi Inouye, who currently lives in Tokyo, he used to live here in New York City. And we used to play in a band together called Quiet Suns. And actually, that stuff, the Quiet Sun stuff, is on my label, andhillrecordings.bandcamp.com. And if you're into like math rock and stuff like that, definitely check it out. It was me on drums and Satoshi on bass, and my friend Adrian on guitar and vocals on the first EP. And the second EP was just me and Adrian. Satoshi had stopped playing at that point and then started working on Echoscape. Now, Echoscape, that is mainly Satoshi's project. He writes all the music, and with that song, the way we had worked on that EP, the Half Moon EP, is he recorded most of the parts already in his apartment on acoustic guitar and bass, and did some like scratch vocals, and then programmed some drums, some basic ideas of what he was thinking. And then we went over to my studio, the old studio I used to have. If you go back to like my 2016 videos, somewhere around there, there's actually a short video of me tracking the drums to one of those songs in my channel somewhere. But anyway, what we did is we set up some mics. It was very minimal miking setup. We had like, I think a stereo overhead pair and then a kick drum mic. And then no, we did more than that. We mic'd up the toms and everything. That's right, because we had two audio interfaces chained together, and we recorded them in Logic on Satoshi's computer in my studio, and just recorded the drums over it, and then he would go back and then up, like basically re-record the guitar and the bass to like have it be more in sync with what I played. And we did that on most of the songs on that EP. And then the new one that's coming out, if you look on his page, Echoscape page, is going to be, like I said, there's like 2 songs with me on it and 2 songs with their current drummer. And so it's really cool. Satoshi's a great musician. He's a really interesting guitar player. He does a lot of tapping, like on acoustic guitar. And he's just a really cool guy. And it's cool to be able to work with him. Even still, even though he moved, we still work together, which is nice. And actually, another album, I'm on another record that just came out by my friend Ronan. I should play one of those later, so I'll get into that later. More stuff with just my drumming, where I play with other people, which is always fun. So yeah, where were we? So now let's get back into this Linux versus Windows discussion. And Ritual 301, are you still buffering there? I don't know why it keeps telling me my connection is not good, even though it is. Like, I have great internet. Like, I really think it's YouTube at this point, because there's no reason why I should be having trouble with my connection. My download and upload speeds are like insanely good. So I don't know what YouTube's problem is, but I do think it's them. Okay, so problems with Linux. Where to begin on this one? Okay, so now before I even get started on this, just want to remind all of you guys, especially if you're just tuning in, I am a hardcore Linux user. I've been using Linux since the early 2000s. I think maybe 2000. Since about 2000, I think, is when I started. So I'm going on 20 years of using it, and I've been using it, a lot. Almost my main OS this whole time. And, thanks, Ritual 301. The compliments on Echoscape. But so I just wanted to, remind all of you again of that, I'm not saying this stuff to insult Linux, because I love it, but let's be honest, it has a lot of problems, and I'm sure if you're a serious Linux user, you will know this. Granted, it's much, much, much better than it used to be, but one of the main issues and one of the biggest problems a lot of new users face is just getting it to work to begin with. Like when you first install it. Now, and this can be, this highly depends on the computer that you're installing it on. you know, if you're using, that's why a lot of times if people are using Linux, I often recommend them to buy a Dell, because Dells almost always work right out of the box with Linux, depending on, well, they almost always do. I don't think I've ever had one not, honestly, even the old ones. But okay, so installation can highly depend on what you're installing it on. So if you have a Dell, like I said, Dell even sells computers with Linux on them new. So, you know, the hardware is pretty much going to support everything that you could throw on it as far as Linux goes. Now, if you're using a Mac, you're probably going to run into some problems on installation, which I have done. In fact, one of my favorite computers that I ran Ubuntu on was one of the old black MacBooks. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably remember when I used to do everything on that thing. And it was a Core 2 Duo MacBook. And once I got it installed, it was amazing. Getting it installed was a bit of a hassle because those things have a weird 32-bit EFI, but 64-bit processors. So I had to do this, like, I had to write my own ISO basically, and I have a video about that on here, which that's one of my most popular videos for good reason, because I didn't invent this code, by the way, that's in that video. I just found it in like a forum and then made the code freely available on GitHub. But it is really, really great. What it does is it remasters an ISO that allows you to boot onto a 64-bit MacBook, one of the ones that were in that weird 2007 era, you know, where they were like, they had the 32-bit EFI, and allows you to boot up into a 64-bit and install 64-bit on that system, which if you don't have that remastered ISO, you can't. It'll give you an error. And so that's just one example. There's plenty of other computers. Like I had a old Gateway that gave me a lot of trouble when I would try to install Linux on it. I would always get it to work, but you know, it can be headaches. And for new users, like they don't know like what a lot of this stuff is, you know, like, and not every Linux distribution installs the same way. You have some that install, you know, you just put in the disk and boot it up, and like you can start installing from when you boot to the disk, and other ones you have to boot into live mode and then install it from there. Other ones is kind of like either or, so there's no like consistent way to install it on any, you know, across all the different distributions. And this can be really troublesome for new users. And sometimes you'll get through an installation all the way and then it won't boot. You know, like this has happened to me countless amount of times. And when I was younger, you know, and like first started working with Linux, I was pulling my hair out so much because it used to be so much worse. Like you have no idea how bad it was unless you used it. But like back in the day, they didn't even have graphic installers. Like everything was like text-based installers, and like, you know, sometimes you'd have to reinstall like 7 or 8 times on the same system before you got it right, because there was no like explanation of all the different options that you had, and like you just had to like either know everything about the Linux kernel or just like total crapshoot and guess, you know, like what you were doing. And you know, that would happen a lot, you know, but it's gotten way, way better. But it's still, you know, yeah, how do you say this? Yaver Musia? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But yes, I got the same Mac, but it can't boot from USB stick. The key point is booting from DVD, which is not my case. Now, that's interesting because I used to think that as well. But you actually can boot those from the USB. It's just very, very difficult. You have to go into the open firmware. I actually got an iBook to do it, which blew my mind. Like I never thought I would be able to get an iBook to boot from USB, but you can. And you can do it on the iBooks, and you can also do it on the MacBooks, but you just have to go into the open firmware, and it's a very long, difficult, tedious thing to do because it doesn't always work the same way depending on the system, but it is possible. So if you're curious, you could look into that. Let's see. He says, now, Man, what if I connect the hard drive with Linux installed on PC? I'm not sure. What do you mean? If you connect a hard drive from a PC to a Mac, is that what you're saying? I don't think that would work. Yeah, that probably wouldn't work if that's what you're saying. But so now, as far as like the installation inconsistencies to install, I really don't see this ever getting better, because the same time as this being a very big flaw, it's also it's a double-edged sword, because it's part of something that is actually really great about Linux, in my opinion, is how there are so many distributions and so many different flavors of Linux. You can find the one that you really like that is, almost closer to your personality. Whereas like Windows and Mac, you have like one choice, and like to me they don't feel like there's much individuality there. Like whereas Linux, you have a lot of different choices, and you can customize it like endlessly to have your own system. Like mine right now, it's Ubuntu, but I'm running Plasma Desktop, so I'm not even running LXDE or LXQT, which is what it runs now, anymore on this system. On my other system, I do run LXQT because I like it on that one. It seems to run better on that one. But but yeah, so this whole installation problem is closely related to the fact that there are so many different distributions and so many different ways to do it, which is also a plus. It's a good thing, in my opinion. So let me look at some of the comments here. Javier said, I started using Linux because I cannot afford paying for different software licenses like Actual OS, Office, WinZip, and others. Actually, I buy a second-hand laptop and just upgrade the RAM and install Xubuntu. I'm writing this on an old Vio. Oh, wow. Yeah, Vio from 2012, and it runs great with Xubuntu. Xubuntu is a nice distro, says Ritual 301. And yeah, I agree. And I do that a lot too, or I used to do it more. And I still do it sometimes. Is there something satisfying about getting these old systems to run something fairly current, or totally current, which is what I loved about using the PowerPC Max with Linux. I really, really wish they would update Ubuntu again to continue to support PowerPC, because it was supporting it up to 16.04. And a lot of you may have seen my iBook videos where I do still run Ubuntu 16.04 on there, but they've dropped support since then, which is a shame. I really wish they would continue to support it, because I love running, Linux on these old systems and getting them to run. I mean, the iBook is, that one's like 2004, something like that. It's really old. But yeah, it's a great feeling to be able, and it's also less wasteful. Like, I think people throw away stuff way too early. Like you have like computer that's like 2 years old and people throw it away, or they give it away. It's like, it's crazy, like this is something that costs like thousands of dollars, or can, and like no other piece of like electronics is like that. Like you buy a pair of speakers, you keep them, like I have a set of Tannoys here that are like almost 20 years old now, and they still sound awesome. Like people are weird with technology, like phones and computers. And I must admit, I'm pretty bad with phones. I always change up my phone, but I don't know. I think because it's much harder to customize Android than it is, I've never really gotten into doing custom ROMs and stuff like that. I know some people are way into that, but I've just never really gotten into it. Let's see what Yavernusia says. Will you give us a video of booting Mac to 3264 from USB stick 16 or on Ubuntu 16.18? Thank you for interesting discussion. By the way, you've read my nick correct. It means I am back in Russian. Oh, okay, cool. The thing is with the booting of from the USB stick on a Mac, well, I could only show you on an iBook because that's the only Mac I have right now. But I could do that. That'd be good. Maybe I'll try to do that. If I get another MacBook at some point, I would do that too. There it is possible, like I said. But where were we on the discussion there? Well, anyway, more negatives about Linux. Stability. Now, as far as the actual OS goes, Ubuntu, or Ubuntu-derived distros, are the only ones I ever use anymore. I used to use other ones. I used to use Red Hat a long time ago. OpenSUSE. I made a distro on OpenSUSE at one point. And what's the other one? Debian. I used to use exclusively Debian, actually. But Ubuntu is the only thing, or Ubuntu-derived distros are the only things I ever use now. And the reason why is because it is very, very stable as far as the OS. I never have a problem. It just runs great. Now, that being said, there's still a lot of stability issues on programs. There's a lot of things that crash or just don't work, especially if you're into like media production and stuff like that and you want to try new things and work on, try to be creative and use different software. And if you experiment a lot, you're going to have a lot of crashes, and that's just part of it. Let's see what Javier said. Right, a 10-year-old laptop being thrown to waste today could be considered a supercomputer many years ago. Windows would crush such old equipment. It all runs fine with Linux. Yeah, totally. I mean, I will give, though, Windows 10 is much nicer on slower hardware than Windows 7 was. Some people may not believe that, but it's true. Windows 10 it's pretty nice, in my opinion, as far as Windows go. Windows 8 was horrible. Windows 7 was a good Windows, but as far as computer resources, I think Windows 10 is actually a little bit better than Windows 7. So, yeah, but Linux software, so many times I've been recording, like there's, what's the one? Muse Sequencer. I had such a hard time with a song that I was recording a Muse Sequencer on Linux. It's actually this song called Faltermeyer's Ferrari. I should play that. But it's one of my older songs. It's on my album. I think it's on Return Home. And this song, I started the song in Muse Sequencer, and I really, really liked where it was going. And suddenly, Muse started just crashing, like at boot. Like I couldn't even load the project. And I was like halfway through the song, and I was really into it, and I was like, I can't let this song go. And I was getting super frustrated. And so I even basically what I had to do was I reached out to the developer of Muse Sequencer, and I was sending him my project files, which were XML files, and he was manually going into the XML files and correcting the bad code in there so I could open up the project again, which was awesome for him to do. I mean, that, nobody in Windows would ever do that, obviously. But so you have that kind of thing with Linux developers, which is amazing. But at the same time, every time I would basically save the program and then try to reopen it, I was having that problem. So it took me 2 months to finish this one song, but I did finish it, and it finally did come out, and it came out really good. And, I've always really liked it, but that was the last time I really did serious work in Muse Sequencer because it was so frustrating. I was freaking out. And I've had some experiences like that in Q-Tractor as well. Q-Tractor, it just does weird stuff. And it's not so much as stability with Q-Tractor, but just weird UI choices. It just does some incredibly frustrating things that made me want to throw my computer into the wall, I don't really use Q-Tractor that much because of that. I know some people really, really like it. I think it's a really, it looks really good, and for very basic stuff, it's pretty good. But once you get into trying to do complicated things, buses and stuff like that, it's just all fucked up. Pardon my French, or at least it used to be a year ago. I don't know how it is now, but yeah, I had serious issues with it, especially when because a lot of times what I'll do with drums is I'll do I'll take all of my drums and then create a stereo bus, and then put compression on that bus. So I do a lot of bus compression because I don't like doing direct compression on a drum. You know, like I hate like compression just on the snare drum. I think it sounds horrible. And but if you do like a bus compressor, you can still have the real, some people call it parallel compression. You can do like a real snare sound and have the dry sound, and plus you can have the compressed sound going at the same time, and you can blend them in together. And it's just a much more natural sounding sound. So, but anyway, when I would try to do that in Q Tractor, it had all kinds of latency. Like it would have latency issues between its own channels, which was really weird. Like, I don't understand how that is even possible. And then like the way it routes things is really weird. Like it just has some very bizarre ways that it handles audio. And let me see what Javier said. I tried Windows 10 in my 2010 laptop, unusable. Windows 7 works fine at some extent. Yeah, well, again, I think it depends on the computer too. Paladini971 says, I have Linux Mint 19.1 Tesla Cinnamon running on my desktop, and anything I throw on it works great. It has an Asus P8 P67 Pro MB Intel i7 CPU, 64 gigabytes of RAM. Well, I mean, with a system like that, I think any system you're running, you know, should run great if you have an i7 with 64 gigs of RAM. You know, but that's cool. I've never tried Cinnamon. I've wanted to try it. I haven't tried that yet. The last time I used Linux Mint was years ago, and yeah, so I don't really know a whole lot about it. I do like, I find a lot of answers in the Linux Mint forums, though. Like, there's a lot of, I know it's a very active community, which is cool. It's probably the most active next to Ubuntu that's out there, and I know a lot of people love Linux Mint, but don't really use it. But I am interested in Cinnamon. I should check that out. Now, from what the screenshots I've seen, it kind of reminded me of the old versions of GNOME. Is it like a derivative of GNOME or something? I don't really know much about it, but anyway. So yeah, software stability, that's an issue with Linux. But, you know, it's all open source. You know, not all of it, but 99% of it is. And you know, so that's the kind of thing if you're a Linux user, you're pretty ready for that stuff, you know. Some people don't get it. You know, they don't understand why you would want to fuss with all this stuff when you could just have, you know, you could just pay the money and, you know, have it work, you know. But like Javier was saying that, you know, that can't really afford, not everybody can afford, well, especially like Microsoft Office. Like I can't afford that. Like, I mean, or like all the Adobe products, like it's like ridiculous the amount of money they charge for these things. So I just, you know, I just won't, you know, spend that much money, you know, until I start. If I were making a lot of money off this stuff, you know, off what I use this media production equipment for, then maybe I would. But for now, you know, Kdenlive works great, you know, and it's free. So, you know, when it starts to crash, it's pretty frustrating. You know, especially when I'm working on a YouTube video or something like that. But, yeah, it is, it's just one of those things, you know, where you're either into it or you're not. Like some people, they don't understand the point of why you would want to mess around with computers. But if you're a nerd, then you get it, you know. So now, you know, we touched on that. Now the positives of Linux, you know, there's a lot of those, and we kind of touched on those a little bit too. You have like everything's free, or mostly everything is free, unless you want to buy some commercial software like Mixbus or Reaper. But you know, like I said before, Reaper is very inexpensive, and so is Mixbus, and they're very good softwares, and I highly recommend both of them. Let's see. Ritual301 says no, it's separate from GNOME, referring to Cinnamon. Cinnamon is kind of similar to maybe a Windows 7. Interesting. Javier says something hard for me in Linux is sometimes there's software. Wait, where'd it go? Sometimes there's software you may need to compile yourself that is not in the distro's repository. Yeah, well, it depends on what you're looking for, you know. But yeah, but the thing is with compiling software, It's actually easy if the documentation is good. It's very easy, really. But if the documentation sucks, then it's impossible. Like some of the problem, or the main problem with compiling from code, is when people just leave out requirements, required packages, and that happens all the time. Like people in the README file need to list all the requirements, or they'll list the requirements but don't tell you where to get them. They're either not in the repositories, or they don't link it to anything, or they call it something else. They'll just call it a nickname or something, it'll be in the repositories as lib. It'll be a library, but they won't tell you that. They'll just tell you that it's a package. So you have to find all that stuff out, for yourself. So that's where compiling becomes really difficult. But if the person created the software and released the code does a good job as far as documentation, then compiling is easy. All you do is just type in, a couple of commands, and then it goes, and it just works. It's very simple. And I learned a lot about that actually from using things like iBooks and stuff like that with Linux, because the only way to get some of that stuff to work on an iBook is to compile it yourself. And that is why, it's kind of helpful if you want to learn about computers to do hacking like that, and try to get these old systems to run modern OSs, because then you will learn. I was able to compile the latest version of NetSurf on my iBook. And NetSurf is a browser. It's kind of a limited browser, but still, you can't get any... well, no, that's not true. You can get 10.4 Fox as a modern browser for iBooks. It'll work, but it's pretty slow. NetSurf is actually much faster, though it supports a lot less. But you can compile the latest version of NetSurf on an iBook with Linux, even if you're running 1604. Let's see here. Got a couple more comments. Yeah, I do think Richwolf301 says, "Oh man, my bad. I stand corrected." Yeah, I do think it is GNOME based. That's what I thought. Because I remember back on the old versions of GNOME, it looked pretty much like how Cinnamon looks now. And I used to use GNOME back then. I liked it. Let's see. Yavor Nolcia says, "Are you streaming from Linux right now?" No, I'm not. I'm on Windows 10. I mentioned that in the beginning, but you weren't around. Yeah, that's cool. You can ask anything you want. I'm actually using Windows 10 with OBS at the moment, but sometimes when I stream here, I do use Linux. I was just already booted into Windows. I was working with Ableton, so I just left it in Windows and streamed from here. Let's see. Ritual301 says, "Still doesn't remind me of GNOME much when I use it, though." Well, yeah, that's because GNOME changed a lot. But if you go back on the old versions of Linux, like the really old version of Red Hat and Debian, you'll see the old versions of GNOME pretty much looked exactly like Cinnamon. People say, or Paladini971 says, "People say if you want to use Linux, you need to use the terminal. All I have done so far as terminal goes is copy and paste." Well, yeah, it's definitely helpful if you know the terminal. I do a lot in the terminal. Because, well, I always install software through there. I never use graphic software installers. I do all my updates through there. Just a lot of stuff. I just like it. You don't have to use it now. You used to have to use it. But now you don't have to at all. Depending on, what you're using. Like if you're using a super minimal version of Linux, then yeah, you do. But on Ubuntu and, Mint, or maybe, actually, I don't know about Mint. But the most popular ones, you pretty much don't have to at this point. But there are advantages to it. It's very fast. I think it's much faster to do things in a terminal than it is to do it in a graphic interface. And also, it's just, you just don't have to mess around and leave one little box. You can do all kinds of things in one little box, rather than have all these different windows open on your computer. So, Ritual301 says, "I don't think terminal is necessary either. I use it a lot, but only because it speeds things up in a lot of cases. But it's totally not necessary." Yeah, pretty much what I was saying. Javier says, "Maybe you can do a video on how to compile Linux sampler." I need it to play some sample libraries through my MIDI keyboard on Ubuntu Studio 1904. Linux sampler isn't in Ubuntu Studio 1904? That's crazy. I don't believe that. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I am doubting you, but I don't believe they would leave that out. That's crazy. But I've never had great... Uh-oh, did I lose my stream? Okay, I'm back. I've never had great luck with Linux sampler. Honestly, God, why do I keep losing my connection here? Anyway, guys, sorry if the streaming settings are getting bad, or the streaming is getting bad and buffering a lot. I'm having a lot of connection issues through YouTube. But what I was saying is Linux sampler. Yeah, I've never really had a lot of luck with that program. I should play around with it more and see what I can do with it. I've mostly never given it much of a chance because I tend to like sound fonts and would use, what's it called? Going blank. Fluid Synth. That's the one. And, there's like the Fluid Synth UI or GUI that I would use, and would use that and make my own sound fonts with I'm going blank a lot. What is the sound font creator software for Linux? Anyway, so Ritual 301 says, gotcha. That's probably why I'm mistaken. I'm only familiar with GNOME 3, I think. Yeah, that's it. It was GNOME 2 is when it still looked like the old one. Ritual 301 says, no, it buffered just for a second. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it went totally blank here on my end. It looked like it was completely cut off. And then Yavernusia says, have you watched Unfa? Oh, yeah, I've talked about Unfa on here before. He's very enthused of Linux, Jack, and Linux producing. Yeah, he's great. He does a lot. He's really, really good with Ardor. That's seems to be his main DAW that he likes. I don't really care for Ardor, but he's really good with it. When I watch him do it, he does a great job. But for me, it's just too awkward to use, so I don't like it. So anyway, on that note, let's go ahead and play another song. And what am I going to play this time? Let's play something off of Ronan's new album, Ronan Conroy. And this is one of those other ones I was talking about before. One of the new albums that just came out that I'm playing drums on. This one's actually available on vinyl, which is really cool. And Ronan is another friend of mine here that lives in New York City. And he produces a lot of music, kind of a singer-songwriter. He's originally from Ireland. And that's another cool thing about living here is I get to work with people from so many different places. And so many different styles of music, which is always really cool. I'm going to paste the link in the chat right now. But Ronan's stuff is very different than what you heard of Satoshi's stuff. And this album, I'm only on a couple songs, I think 3 songs on here. And I'm going to play one on here that I am on, which is called You're So Cruel. So I'm going to play this right now. And then we'll get back to discussing these topics and more once we get back. So let me go ahead and start this song, and then I'll be right back.
I don't know if what I'm doing is a good idea. I don't know if I care anyway. I don't know you. Who am I dealing with? You're so cruel. Or is it you who brings the crazy, crazy for you? Oh, anyway, but you're so cruel. Oh, you're so cruel. I'm such a fool for this, 'cause you're so cruel.
All right, that was You're So Cruel by Ronan Conroy, and like I said, that was me on drums, and that was recorded, I don't even know when, because the way Ronan does stuff, I could have recorded that song either 3 months ago or like 5 years ago. Like, I don't remember, because I've recorded so much with him, and it's always like it's never in order. Like, he always oh, let me get my camera back on. He always does things like, we'll record a bunch of songs, and then he releases albums like not in the order that he records them. Like, one song could be recorded like 5 years ago, then just released on an album now, or that album could have one that was recorded a few months ago, and things like that. So that has happened a lot with him. So I don't even know when that was recorded, but we've done them all in the same studio, which is Capture Sound Studio in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and that's run by our friend Charlie Nealon, who he's an excellent musician. Like, he plays all the other instruments on Ronan stuff, besides the vocals and the guitar. Well, even does guitar sometimes, but he even did drums on the other half of that album. Charlie's an incredible musician, and a little bit of trivia: he used to play with one of the guys from Nine Inch Nails, like when he was in college with him. Not Ronan, but Charlie, the producer of that, what you just heard. But yeah, really great musicians, and Ronan is a passionate singer and songwriter, and just a really cool guy. He's always been a big supporter of my music too. Like, he's bought pretty much everything I've ever released, and yeah, so definitely check him out and support if you can. Buy the new album. It's great to have stuff on vinyl if you have a turntable. Even if you don't have one, you could buy one. They're not that expensive now. But so let's see. Were there any comments here? Oh, more stuff about Oomfa. And yeah, Oomfa's he's probably, if you search Linux audio, me and him come up like top, I think, at this stage. I think his channel is a little more focused than mine. Mine definitely crawls out into other territory that some of you guys might not like, but that's just who I am. So I don't know, like I tend to get into all kinds of stuff here. I like drums a lot, and UFOs and things like that, and just kind of tend to wander off into all kinds of topics. But I do cover Linux quite a bit. Let's see. Ritual 301 says, I was getting some Morrissey vibes, dug it. Yeah, he likes, I think he's more of a Cure fan than Morrissey, but yeah, I think he does like, Ronan listens to all kinds of stuff. He's got a huge record and CD collection. Way too huge to be living in New York City and moving around with it, but he does somehow. Like, if it were me, I'd throw everything away. Like, I have like vinyl, and that's all. Like, I threw away, you guys are going to hate me, but I literally threw away all my CDs. I just threw them in the garbage. And I threw away all my tapes too, cassettes. It's just too hard to move everything. Like, once you move to a 4th floor building in Brooklyn and have to carry like 8 million boxes up 4 flights of stairs in August in no AC, like, you just don't want anything anymore. You're like, I'm throwing everything away because it is just not fun to deal with that kind of stuff. And speaking of throwing away, actually, like, the reason why I haven't done a lot of videos lately, some of you might have noticed, it's just been like little things here and there, and like, little screen captures and stuff, nothing major, is because I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And the behind-the-scenes work that I'm working on is, well, one, I'm sad to say, well, kind of sad, half happy and half sad, that I'm getting rid of my drum room, the tiny little box drum room studio that you guys have seen in my videos, where I've done a lot of Milky Tracker and drummer videos and those kind of things. I have to get rid of that because I really just can't afford it anymore. It is a luxury expense that I was, rented when I still had a 9-to-5 job. So I really can't afford it, unless I start getting like crazy amount of patrons here and stuff like that, or like just a ton of ad revenue, but I really can't. So I'm getting rid of that. However, I ordered an electronic drum kit, and it is going to be sitting right over there. And I'm really excited about this, even though, electronic drums are not drums at all. They're not like acoustic drums. They're very different. But I'm really excited about it for a couple of reasons. One, I look at an electronic drum set as just it's a different thing. It's a different beast, and I don't look at it like trying to replace an acoustic drum set, which some people do. And I think if you do that, you're setting yourself up for failure, because an electronic drum set will never sound like an acoustic drum set. It's like an electric guitar will never sound like an acoustic guitar. Sure, you can have emulators and stuff like that and pedals that kind of make it sound like it, but not really. So I think with electronic drums, as long as you look at them like they're their own thing, which is how I look at them, then, I think it opens up all kinds of possibilities. Like, I don't even have to use drum sounds. I can use samples. I can do all kinds of stuff. And like, what's really cool about the kit that I'm getting, it's an Alesis, is it has a USB MIDI output. So I will actually be able to control and trigger things like Ableton and Hydrogen and Linux. I could do all that right from the drum set, which is going to be awesome. Like, I'm super excited about that. And then another reason why I'm excited about it, and one of the things I hated about my drum room, is I have a lot more space here. My drum room was so tiny and the lighting was so bad in there. I never had a spot to put the camera, like where I thought it looked good. Like, it always looked like shit. And so that's why I would put like VHS effects and just like whatever random crap on there, because it just never looked good. Like, even if I had I had this ring light in there, but there was never a place to put it like in the correct position, like with the cameras. So in here, once I get the set up, which should be tomorrow, I should be getting it. So expect an unboxing video about that once I get it. Hopefully UPS doesn't fail, which they do sometimes. And hopefully it does arrive tomorrow. But it's going to be sitting right over here, and I have plenty of space to put multiple cameras, and I can use my best cameras. I could set up lighting. I could do a green screen if I want to. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be really, really awesome. And plus, I can play at all hours of the night and not disturb anybody, because it has mesh heads and it's 100% silent with headphones. Like, it's just going to be really, really cool. I'm super excited about it. And so in order to prepare for that, I've had to get rid of a lot of stuff, because I had all kinds of crap here. I had several synths and, like just stuff I didn't use that much or would only use for a YouTube video. And I'm just clearing out a lot of the junk. And plus I was selling stuff to get money to buy the electronic kit. So I did that and I ordered it, I think day before yesterday. It's supposed to be here tomorrow. So yeah, I'm super stoked. And I'm excited to see what I can do with Linux with that drum set. Like I mentioned, it will, like Hydrogen, I know works great with like my pad controller. So I'm assuming I will be able to do like all the stuff that I could do with a pad controller with a real electronic kit, which will be even cooler, because then I can have I can create my own sample libraries in Hydrogen and then play them using the electronic kit. And I think it's going to be really cool. And plus the electronic kit also has its built-in sounds and all that stuff too, which I can mess around with and edit and do all kinds of stuff with that. So super stoked on that. And the prices of those things has come down quite a bit. You used to not be able to get an electronic drum set or a decent one for under $1,000, but now there's a lot of options. Ritual 301 says, I know that feeling, man. At one point, I think I was averaging 1 move a year back when that sucked. Yeah, moving, moving is horrible. It is so, it's just not fun. I should tell that full moving story because it's actually pretty funny. But and then Ritual 301 also says, that'll be awesome. Look forward to the new setup. Thank you. And always wanted an electronic set back when I played a lot and live and live in an apartment. Yeah, I mean, so that's the reason why I'm doing it. I'm keeping my acoustic set, obviously. I've cleared out some space in my closet where I can stuff it in there. I mean, I have a small acoustic set anyways. It's a Tama Bop, so it only has an 18-inch bass drum, so I can store it. I will not be getting rid of the acoustic set. I love it. I don't know when I'll be able to actually use it again here in New York, unless I go on tour or something with Frame or like one of the bands I'm playing in, but definitely keeping it. So yeah, I know I'm getting off topic, but, well, we might as well talk a little bit about Mac OS, cause we didn't really touch on that too much. And, honestly, I don't have much negative to say about Mac OS, other than, it's like kind of like having a car with the hood welded shut, you know, like where that's anything Mac, they just keep a strict control over their stuff, and you can't really hack it or mess with it that much. I mean, you can to some extent, but that being said, it runs really, really well, and it always has, at least since they've been using Mac OS X. And Mac OS X has a lot of similarities with Linux. So if you know Linux and you know the terminal and the commands, you can use a lot of those within Mac OS X, because OS X is Unix. It's a type of Unix. It's built on Darwin, which is actually very similar to BS. Or it's actually BSD, I think, a type of BSD. So it is in the Unix Linux family. So it's actually more similar to Linux than Windows is by far. You can even, if you get used to compiling software in Linux, if you have Xcode on a Mac, you can compile software that way, and it's sort of similar. There's a lot of stuff that's similar, like all the copy, paste, and move commands are all the same. All the type of basic Unix programs that run in Linux will run in Mac OS. So most of my opinion of Mac OS is very positive, and I probably would buy a newer Mac if I had that kind of money to blow. Especially that new Mac Pro. Oh my God. If any of you haven't seen that thing yet, check that thing out. This computer is epic. It is the craziest computer Mac has ever made. It looks like, I'm really glad they went back to a tower design for the Mac Pro, and it's just insanely powerful. It goes up to terabytes of RAM. It's just insane. They really, really went nuts with this thing. They showed a demo of it running 3 6K monitors at once. It's just nuts. But the base version, the cheapest version of it is $6,000. So, it's obviously not for your average user, but Mac makes some incredible stuff. They always have. I'm not a Mac hater. I like Macs a lot. I just don't like iPhones. I've had a couple iPhones, but I've never really liked them. I'm an Android guy, which, if you don't know, Android is a type of Linux. It's basically Linux kernel running Java apps is kind of how Android works. Of course, it's much more complicated than just that, but I have this Pixel 3a now, and I really like this. But and the reason why I don't like iPhones, they're very stable, and they work good, and they're nice phones, but they are the same reason a Mac. My only criticism about OS X is just how locked down they are. You can't really, you can't plug an iPhone into a computer and just copy files to it, just drag and drop, a file, or a music file. You can't do that. It's not that simple. You have to open up iTunes and do all, synchronize it and do all this crap, and it's just it makes everything difficult. Even if you want to copy photo device, although I heard that they're improving that, They are starting to support like drives and stuff like that. Ritual 301, $999 for the monitor stand. Yeah, I mean, hey, if they can do it and they pull it off, in a way, I think it's good because, like, for one, they're not pushing a bunch of cheap crap out onto the market that people will just buy and throw away. Like, like we were talking about earlier, like people who are going to buy the $6,000 Mac with a $999 monitor stand are going to be keeping that thing as long as they possibly can. And for good reason, because it's freaking $10,000 or something, But at the same time, it's going to blow everything away. Like, it's going to just run so good. If you have that kind of money to spend on it, obviously the people who are doing that are going to be able to afford the commercial software, and they'll have all the best programs and all the best everything. And like we're talking people like, Disney Studio, like Marvel Studios are going to be using this thing. It's like people like that. So, I mean, for what it is, it's the best. It's up there as like the most solidly running Mac OS. It is going to run good. And there's just nothing else I can really say about that. I mean, as far as the programs go, yes, there's less available for Mac than there are for Windows and Linux. But what you get, it's going to cost you, but it's going to work really well. And that's just pretty much how it is. But if you're a tinkerer and somebody that likes to mess around with stuff and hack, may not be the best thing, and that's, But you can also get a MacBook and install Linux on it because they do run Linux fairly well, because they're, like I said, they're Unix machines. So, and a lot of people, like I said, I had the old black MacBook and ran Ubuntu on that, and it performed amazingly well. Not with Unity. I would always run IceWM because IceWM is so fast. The only bad thing on those old black and white MacBooks were the graphics cards. Like, they were terrible. So if you try to run like GNOME or Unity or something like that, it's just going to suck. So it's best to have, my favorite was always IceWM because IceWM takes it eats no resources. Like, it just works really, really well. And that's what I use on my iBook too. So yeah. And even on the iBook, like, it runs super smooth with IceWM and Ubuntu 16.04. But yeah, so I mean, Macs, their hardware is, it's well made. It looks good. It's just stylish. I don't know. All the stuff people say is pretty true, So that's that. Kind of tapped out on the Windows versus Linux versus Mac. And I have a few other things I wanted to talk about on this podcast. And like usual, I always have movies that I watch and stuff like that and music recommendations. And I watched a lot of movies since the last podcast with Marcus H. If you haven't listened to that one, it was a live stream, but we did it late, so there was hardly anybody online. That was a pretty cool podcast. You should check it out. Marcus H. is in the UK, and we talked about experimental music and UFOs, and that was a lot of fun. He was a great guest. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is I am shamefully going to admit that for a long time, I was a moon landing hoax believer. Because, okay, only half shamefully. It was my problem because I really didn't look into it as deeply as I should have until recently. And I'm going to go over all this. But there's a lot of reasons on surface to believe that it's a hoax that we went to the moon. And two of the main reasons for me were the fact that they lost the original broadcast tapes or they recorded over them. And two, that they somehow lost all the telemetry data. That always really bothered me. And that's documented. That's real. Those things do not exist now, which is why we have such a hard time of relearning this stuff. But that being said, what I was doing, I was toying with the idea of making a moon hoax conspiracy video. And I started doing research, like deep research, deeper than I ever did, and went into depth about all this stuff and learning as much as I can. And it proved to me, without a doubt, 100%, that we absolutely did go to the moon. And there's no doubt in my mind. And it is the most amazing thing I mean, it's so funny. Like right now, I am like, it's like new to me because I always was so skeptical. But like now, I'm like just blown away. I'm like, oh my god! Like these guys actually pulled this off. Like it was the most insane thing that human beings have ever pulled off, and they did it like really, really well. I mean, the thing is like, you know, one of the questions that always came up or that I always talk about, well, how come nobody died? It seems pretty, you know, amazing that we made it to the moon all those times and like there was not a single accident. Well, first off, that's not even true. Apollo 1, the entire crew of Apollo 1 was killed. And a lot of people don't know this. They never even made it off the frickin' runway. And Apollo 1 wasn't going to go to the moon. It was just one of the research missions. There were a lot of research missions up to Apollo 11. And this is why, basically, they were able to pull off Apollo 11 and 12 and 13 had issues, but it's still, you know, nobody died. And I think they went up to what, 19 or 17 or something like that. But they pulled all these off. 24 guys made it to the moon. And they pulled it all off without a serious accident. And the reason why they were able to do that is because they had so many accidents and disasters leading up to that. And it is crazy. Like the more you learn about this stuff, like the whole Gemini program, and like I was saying with Apollo 1, what had happened with Apollo 1 is all of the astronauts, they were in the command module and they were getting ready to launch, and at this point, they were basically filling the module with pure oxygen, which seems like an incredibly stupid idea. But apparently, you know, in space, it's okay to do that. But what had happened is there was a spark, and they never determined where the spark came from. But it created a flash fire that killed all 3 astronauts in like 30 seconds. It just burned them like immediately. It's crazy. It's horrible, horrible tragedy. And, but you know, the reason why I guess they had this, pure oxygen, in the cockpit was because when you're in space, some technical reason why, maybe I'm not, let's see. Mulcia says, I think that human space trip totally impossible because no way of turning back, landing, free falling through the atmosphere because there are no thermal isolation materials. There are such materials we could have lived on the North and South Pole. Well, there are materials like that, actually. You know, I don't know the names of them, but all the information is out there for sure. I mean, these guys did do it. And if you're skeptical, I mean, I was skeptical, totally. But there's a few things that you could watch that will pretty much kill all that skepticism. And one of them is a channel called Vintage Space. And it is run by this girl, I can't remember her name, but she is really good. And she addresses basically all of these theories in a very mature and way. And she actually gives you all of the documented scientific data that shows you how they did all this stuff, and like just lays it out very matter-of-factly, and you can check it out for yourself, and it's all there. And then if that isn't convincing enough, the newly released movie called Apollo 11 that features tons of never-before-seen footage, 70-millimeter film footage of the entire Apollo 11 from launch to traveling to the moon, and then back, in amazingly clear detail, and the footage is absolutely incredible. It is, and this is one of the this is how I got on this topic to begin with, because it's one of the movies that I wanted to recommend. It's a documentary. You can rent it now, and it's just called Apollo 11, and it is mind-blowing. Like, it is so cool. This rocket, like the Saturn V rocket, was such an insanely huge rocket. They still have never made a rocket this big. It weighed like thousands of tons. They used the machine they used to even move the rocket is mind-blowing, and that's how the film opens up. It's got this like these 4 like gigantic tanks basically on the bottom with this huge, I mean, it's just so insane, the amount of work and the amount of stuff that they went through to make this happen. It's just mind blowing. It's one of the most amazing achievements. I mean, it has to be the most amazing achievement of all humankind. Like researching this has given me such an immense appreciation for what these guys did. I don't know. It's like I feel like it changed me, like, because I never really looked into it. And then, like, okay, so there's Apollo 11. I also watched First Man, which again is I highly recommend this movie. This one's about, it's basically a movie, a fictionalized version of Neil Armstrong, and the amount of stuff that this guy went through from 15 years before he was walking on the moon is pretty crazy. And like, one of the big criticisms, a lot of moon conspiracy people will say, like, their press conference, they seemed all agitated and, just seemed like uncomfortable. Well, the more you learn about these guys that actually went to the moon, their mannerisms and their personalities actually make perfect sense in that press conference. Because Neil Armstrong was a sad guy. Like, he was not a happy man. He had a lot of problems. His little daughter at like 5 years old or 4 years old or something died of cancer. All his friends, he was good friends with the Apollo 1 team. They all died, like, right before, like a few years before he was going up there. Like, all these people he knew were dying all around him all the time. And like, he almost died several times, even in the training when they were preparing for the moon launch. He was trying to land one of the lander. They had this one on Earth. It wasn't the LEM, and this is another thing that a lot of moon conspiracy people say, is like, he couldn't even land the LEM on Earth. Well, it wasn't the LEM. It was a LEM simulator. They couldn't actually do the LEM because it would operate completely different in Earth's atmosphere. But he almost died landing this thing, or trying to land this thing. And you could actually see a video of that on YouTube, which is crazy. Like, he comes like within like probably 4 or 5 feet of crashing on the ground, and then ejects, and like the eject seat like shoots him way up in the air, and then he parachutes back down. And it's really cool. So all of that stuff, and there's tons and tons of it. The main one I recommend is Vintage Space. Like I said, her videos debunking the moon hoax conspiracies are some of the best you will ever see. And then definitely watch Apollo 11 documentary. It is mind-blowing. I can't stress enough how blown away I was by that movie. Really, really good. Now, other movies that I've seen recently was the new Godzilla. And I really enjoyed the new Godzilla too, though it gave me a massive headache from all the explosions and bass. But it was really cool. If you're a Godzilla fan, it was epic. It had all the monsters in there, all fighting. Reminded me of like the 90s, 2000 era Japanese ones, except with like way better effects. And I really liked it. Also, Rocket Man. Just saw that night before last, and I was... all my reviews are good this time. I was amazed. I was so impressed with Rocket Man. I thought I would be like kind of into it. I've always liked Elton John, and I thought it'd be cool to see, a biopic about Elton John. But this movie is so much more than that. It is really a very creative piece of art, really. It's not just a biopic. They took a lot of creative license, but all in a good way. It was very entertaining. My only slight, tiny little criticism of it is the actor's voice that plays Elton, but obviously he had impossible shoes to fill, and no way he's going to sound like Elton. He pulls it off for the most part. He sounds like he's out of his comfort zone in several of the songs, but he still pulls it off, and the acting is amazing. The whole movie is just incredibly entertaining. It's very funny and sad and trippy, and like it's got like a lot of, it shows you how much of a crazy like party maniac he was, which is, if you didn't, I already kind of knew that, but a lot of people didn't realize that. Like, Elton John was like pretty insane. Like, he did a lot of drugs. But it was really, really good. I highly recommend it. So I think I loved all of those. Apollo 11 being my favorite out of the three I mentioned, just because the footage of that movie is absolutely stunning. 70 millimeter film, of never released footage of the moon landing. It's just amazing. And I mean, the thing is when you see all this stuff and you see all this machinery, you know, if they were going to fake the moon landing, they could have done it so much cheaper than they did it. Like, I mean, there was a lot of shit to go through to fake something. Like, I mean, there's no way. I mean, there's just absolutely no way it's fake. It's real, and it's amazingly impressive. Let me read some of these comments here. Ritual301 says, isn't aerogel used to control thermals? Not sure how new tech that is, though. Yeah, I don't know what they technically are, but I know they have them. I mean, I've watched several of the SpaceX missions, and, you know, Elon Musk just, you know, remote landed something and returned it to Earth. He's doing it all the time now. I mean, they're doing a lot. Aerogels are super cool, though. Vertasium did a video on it like a week or two ago. I'm not familiar with that channel, but I'll check it out. So yeah, Apollo 11. What I was saying is the footage. I mean, once you learn about all the stuff they did to prepare for this launch, I mean, it's just 100% convincing. There's no way it was fake. No way. Even like once you start learning about what the things that they argue, you know, like the reasons for it to be fake too, and you learn more about the science, like the one with the no crater below the launch or the lunar module. Even Neil Armstrong himself in Apollo 11, when they land, after he gets out and he looks at the actual moon, he even comments on that. So, like, if they were faking this, why would it doesn't even make any sense that, you know, one of the people who's participating in the fake would mention something, you know, that's supposedly proving that it's fake. Like, that doesn't even make sense. But he does comment on it. He's like, yeah, you know, surprisingly, there's no crater at all under the LEM from the landing, and he's commenting on the dust, you know, and like the consistency of the dust. And like another thing too that I didn't realize is when he climbed out, he stood on the LEM's foot for about 10 or 15 minutes before he actually stepped on the ground. Because, you know, I mean, you think about this, you know, you're on an alien planet, essentially. You don't know what that dirt's going to do when you step on it. Like, it could, like, have suddenly, like, shocked him with, like, thousands of volts of electricity for all he knows, you know? Like, so, like, he stood there for a while before he even put a foot down. And then Buzz Aldrin waited a good 20 minutes before he came out. So, you know, they're cautious. There is a lot of precautions taken. And it was, you know, just learn about it. That's all I could say. The more you learn about it, the more you'll realize that this was real, and it was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. It is amazing. And now I'm like super stoked. You know, I'm like all into it now. Like, I hope we go back. Like, I really want to see what SpaceX does and what these other companies like Jeff Bezos' company does to get up there. And Ritual301 says, got a jet, dude. Thank you so much for the stream. And congrats again on the 5,000 subs. Take care. Thank you. And thanks for coming by and chatting again. And yeah, this one's been fun. So I think that's going to about wrap it up. I mean, we're at like an hour and 49 minutes already. Jeez, that went so fast. But anyway, thanks, guys. Unless anybody has any other questions they want to ask right now, and I'll give it a couple minutes because I know there's a delay by the time you guys hear what I just said. So if you guys have any other questions or anything like that, go ahead and post them now, and we'll continue. But if not, then I'm going to log off and play one more song before we take off here. But yeah, what else? I know there's some other movies. Well, I started watching Rim of the World, but I fell asleep last night, and that's a Netflix original movie, and so far it was actually really good, but I don't want to comment on it totally until I watch the whole thing. Yeah. So, well, actually, why don't I play a song now, and then that'll give you guys a chance to hear this, and if you want to ask another question, you can while the song's playing, then I'll talk about it when I get back. And we'll just take it from there. So let me see what I'm going to play. And my computer is suddenly going really slow. And, you know, I'm in Windows, so maybe that's why. It's actually iTunes going really slow, which ashamed to admit that I'm using iTunes right now. The only reason why I have that on here is because I was streaming Apple Music, which you can do online in the web player, which I mentioned in my last video. But I just had iTunes open, so I was using that. Let's see. What am I going to play? Let's play... Oh, let's play something else off my new record. And let's go in here. Let's see. See, okay, this is the only other song that wasn't released on YouTube before the album came out. And this one's called I'm a Parrot. So I'm going to go ahead and play this one. And then I'll be right back to answer any more questions you guys might have. So here we go. Let's turn my audio volume back up. And here's I'm a Parrot by Demonic Sweaters. Okay, that was I'm a Parrot by Demonic Sweaters, and I posted the link in the chat there if you guys are interested. And like I said, it'll be on all the streaming services here pretty soon as well. So if you want to wait, you can check it out there. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions coming in for the time being, but I feel like that was a good live stream and podcast. And thanks to all you guys for watching and listening and participating. That was a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll be back very soon for another one. And if you're around tomorrow, like I said, hopefully if that electronic kit comes, there'll be an unboxing video by the end of the day tomorrow. And I wonder if I should... I don't know. I don't know if I could do a live stream unboxing. That might be too weird. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great week. See you real soon.